We need to be able to gracefully disagree. We have reduced or lost our ability to design from the heart. And when I talk to architects about this, they say we need the heart back. The most sustainable things in life are those things you will not throw away because you love them too much.
Yeah, that's a good.
Logically, there's too much height. Emotionally, it's perfect. And put color. They put yellow and red and blue, and it was excitement. That's all it needed. Don't lose what was in your heart when you entered architecture, what you loved about architecture. Don't worry about, because sometimes the reason comes at the end of the design process. If you try to develop a rational version of beauty, you'll never get there. Just trust your intuition, see where it goes, and then adapt. You don't have to do it linearly. You don't have to start with an idea and then execute the idea. No, I am above cute. I know better. I have seen the light. What does it mean?
So we're gonna start. I guess you will tell us.
Yay!
Okay, John. Very good to see you here in Miami. Welcome to this exhibition, Out of Context. It's a show about the work of 7 architects coming from 7 different countries. Everybody presents a single project. The idea is that all of these projects are very, very different. They not only come from different regions, but they also have, they have different functions. They are done on different scales, out of different materials, and we kind of decode with the architects all of these projects. And I'm trying to trace what were the original ideas, what inspired these architects, and then we go beyond these projects and talk about the current moment of architecture and how their work fits into it. And so I ask a lot of questions. And I want to know different opinions, contradicting opinions. I want to know how to do good architecture and what are different ways of doing it, what are different attitudes. So welcome to this exhibition, and to start, I want you to introduce yourself. What do you do, and what do you do here at WAF?
So my name is Jennifer Marx, Chief Artistic Officer of San Francisco-based Form 4 Architecture, and I'm doing 2 separate things here. So I presented 2 projects, actually 3 times, because there was a WAF prize that we won for Creative Community number 1.
Congratulations!
And yes, thank you. And then for Ethics and Values, which I was very excited about the category. And then also today at 2:00, I'm going to be part of a panel discussion with Jeremy Melvin and 3 other folks. About this book and about the concept of second century.
Can you show the book?
Oh yeah. So here's the book.
I actually have a copy of this book. Thank you so
you
much.
came to the party in New York.
Yes.
And so also for WAF, this little booklet. So Jeremy and I co-wrote this. I wrote a section. He wrote a section. I wrote a section. He wrote a section on lovable buildings. Because because when you talk about emotional meaning in architecture, people get a little intimidated because they think we're going to go back to Disneyland, or we're going to go back to neoclassical architecture or the Romantic Village, and that becomes an existential crisis almost. It's a question, but it becomes a crisis for modern architects to decide, what's important. And for me, I'm very pro-modern architecture, but I'm also very pro-emotional meaning. And I think as we've navigated through 100 years of modernism, hence first century modernism, we need to review and look at what we've done and how we've sort of fallen short and how we've excelled. And it started with this question, how has modernism failed us? And I think in looking at modernism, it became very important from the analysis I was doing to look at the basic tenets of modernism, and I think they're still good. I mean, I think they're still strong, but they need revision, they need thoughtfulness, like democracy. Democracy is still an extraordinary idea, but it needs to be fine-tuned. The democracy in the United States of 250 years ago is not the same as the democracy now, and what people need and how that works needs to change. So then the question became, rather than how has modernism failed us, it became how have we failed modernism, which is a completely different issue. And I think the basic part of it is we have an imbalanced situation where we design in a linear, logical, verbal thought process, and for overwhelming sense of that. It's like, why does that line go like that? And if there's windows, people say, well, it doesn't shade the windows, therefore the line must stop. But you look at the line and you go, but that's beautiful. And they go, well, that doesn't matter, right? That's not a reason. So we have reduced or lost our ability to design from the heart. And when I talk to architects about this, they say we need the heart back. But how do we get the heart back into architecture?
Maybe rely on a particular theory, right? And something has to be very rational.
No, that's the problem. If you try to develop a rational version of beauty, you'll never get there. Mm-hmm. So it's a balance of thinking and feeling, or the mind and the heart. I'm in heaven because the theme this year is hearts and minds, right? Mm-hmm. Which means a balance between the rational, theoretical, logical, conceptual, which is very important, but adding back into that the intuitive, the quirky, the human, trusting your intuition, trusting what beauty really is, right? And that comes from the heart. And so we're scared of the heart now.
And I think what you're talking about, a kind of next step after modernism, I think you're talking about
second century
postmodernism.
Well, no. So one great review of this book said it's not anti-modern, but it's not postmodern.
So what is it? What's the name?
It advocates for a rebalancing. Mm-hmm. So for me...
So you take something from both.
You take something from all the things that have happened and you say, what's not working and what could work better. So I think the basic tenets, not all of them, but most of the basic tenets of modernism are still as powerfully true today as they were then. But the thing is, we've lost a little bit of humanity to it. Okay. And I think that started about 60 years ago.
How do you bring it back? And for example, in this book, so the buildings that you included in this book, do you think they work? These are good examples?
Well, so what happened in this book is I would say the provocation was we need to design more lovable buildings. I use the word love a lot. And one of the ways, because people say the world's on fire, we need to sustainability. And that's incredibly important. To never want to diminish the importance of sustainability. But I have a quote for this. The most sustainable things in life are those things you will not throw away because you love them too much.
Yeah, that's a good
and that
point.
Word love is so important. So if you love something, you will fight for it, you will maintain it, you will support it. But if you don't love it, you will throw it away. It just doesn't have the emotional value.
So tell me to start, what kind of architecture do you love?
Oh, so that was the provocation with this, or the question with this, was people would say, I say, we need more lovable buildings. And in Lisbon, at the WAF, we did a panel discussion called Lovable Buildings in a Man-Made World, right? And we were trying to look into this. And the architectural review said, you have to, if you're going to, so I said, we need people to bring 2 examples, right, of lovable buildings. So the AR said, well, if you're going to ask them to bring 2 examples, you have to define lovable. And at that point, I said, no. I said, lovability is an intention. I want 20 million designers telling us what lovable is. I don't want to tell them and then they follow it, right? Well, as it turns out, I've made that statement 100 times. And almost every time people say, we need more information on that. We need a start. We're scared. Well, not scared, but we're unsure of what you mean by that, and we're unsure to get out of our logical box and be a little more intuitive and be a little more loving. So I said, fine. So Jeremy said, do you want to do this thing? And I said I would love to. Go with lovable buildings. So in this thing, Jeremy wrote about 9 buildings he believes are lovable, and I wrote about 9 buildings that I believe are lovable. So in general, we're saying these all work. So it's 50-page little document. It's free to everybody at WAF. But then there's an introduction. We both wrote introductions. We both wrote conclusions. And in my introduction, it's 4 pages long. It's a synopsis of this whole idea of second century modernism, about the dynamic that we're in and the imbalance that we're in, and we need to rebalance it. It's just gone too far. I mean, there's a general theory that all good things get exaggerated to the point of absurdity, and we have to bring them back into balance, right? It's Hegel, natural order of back and forth. So, so that's kind of the essence.
So I see Disney Hall on the cover.
Yes. So Disney Hall was mine.
Yeah. Okay.
And this was Jeremy's.
Foster.
Which is Foster's
one of his
Willis Farber
earliest
building, one of the
projects.
earliest ones. And so we don't agree necessarily. I don't believe this building is truly lovable from my definition
so there's
of
a
it.
disagreement. Okay.
So we didn't have to agree.
Okay.
But I think, as you were talking about at the very beginning of this, healthy debate, creative tension
Exactly.
is a good thing. Because if we're too polite, I mean, we need to be polite. Otherwise, we have the divisive politics we have right now because people stop being polite and nice to each other. But we also need to be able to talk about serious things in serious ways. And we need to be able to gracefully disagree. And so we do that in here. And I think it's very healthy.
Do you have any overlap? You have
your own
nine,
So
and he has his own nine?
Jeremy, I can't speak for Jeremy, but Jeremy brought in Ronchamp,
And you did
Corbu's.
as well?
I think that's a beautiful, amazing. I mean, I would have written about it if Jeremy didn't write about it. And also the TWA terminal by Saarinen. Like, to me, both of those are lyrically expressive. They're from the heart. Corbu did the normative minimalist modernism before World War II that was very straight, and Jeremy writes about the faculty housing for the Bauhaus, right? And that's like early Corbu, early modernism. After World War II, Corbu starts to become more lyrical. He become more passionate. The heart comes back into it, right? So, and then Saarinen picks this up, and Saarinen does these beautiful. It's just so sad that he died so young.
Yeah,
I mean,
he
it's
practiced
the same.
only for a decade. That's all.
Exactly. And
He never seen his own build. Many of his own buildings.
Didn't see them finished.
Yeah.
And just as tragic as Zaha dying so early. I mean that because she was able to. I mean, I think she and Frank Gehry are on par.
Well.
Yes, yeah. There's a chapter, or there's a section that I wrote on Zaha. There's a section.
I wonder what building did you include of hers?
Well, what's interesting is there's quite a range of buildings, but even within this, there's a critique. Sometimes there's a playoff. So, for example, I wrote about sacred space, right? So, sacred space, is an interesting thing. It's like, should you love a sacred? Should it be lovable, or should it be serious, right? Now, the thing is I'm not trying to stop minimalism, poetic minimalism, where there's emotional content. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to say is all buildings have emotional charge to it, emotional meaning to it, and we don't have sufficient language to think about what's the emotion that this space, for example, is giving us, right? There's your space here, which is very lively and exciting. Then there's the black ceiling and the vast space of the hall, right? Which is, but it's a backdrop, right?
You're not supposed to see that.
Yeah. So the backdrop allows this space that you created to shine, to be vibrant, right? So not every space needs to be a foreground space. Not every space needs to be lovable. Some spaces need to be serious. Some spaces need to give you a Zen sense of calm or resonance with the universe in a different way. But we need a range. We've limited our range to minimalism and occasionally brutalism, and we have a hard time getting out of that range. And minimalism, almost by definition, has almost no emotion to it. So you sort of take the humanity out of it, and then you wonder why the public disengages, why the public thinks that architecture is increasingly less relevant to their lives because they have no emotional engagement.
So if you could talk about the reasons for including this at least 9 buildings into this group.
Yeah,
what are the features that you really love about this example?
Well, it varies from building type to building type. And so for example, back to sacred space. So I had two examples I played off of each other, which was Gaudi's Sagrada de Familia, right? And then Tadao Ando's Church of the Light. Both of them are amazing buildings. Gaudi's building is the lovable one. I would say that, and this is an important distinction between loved and lovable. I love Tadao Ando's Church of the Light. I don't believe it's lovable. I don't believe it needs to be lovable. I don't believe it should be lovable. But Gaudi's
And you've been there.
church,
You've been to that church.
no, I haven't been to
yourself.
that church. I haven't been to the church, but I've seen enough photographs of it and I've heard stories of it to know what
And
it
you
is.
don't think you would cry when you
Oh no,
step
no. Well,
into
next
it?
time I'm in Japan, but I don't know when that's going to be. But the thing is you can feel it even through the photographs, right? The power of that space.
Yeah.
And so it's poetic minimalism, poetic brutalism, which is an extraordinarily important thing that architects should aspire to. And when they do it, it's wonderful. It's when the poetry drops out of the description. When it's non-poetic brutalism and non-poetic minimalism is where in general, architecture starts to fail. And it's not the people that come to WAF who are all of a very high quality. It's the other 95% of the architects that are designing minimalism but without a soul, right? But what's interesting is Gaudi's is both loved, I love it, it's also lovable. The color, the forms, the kind of the joy of it. So Tadao Ando's space is not inherently joyful, but it's very powerful. They're different. So it's the in-between is where, so then I talk about some other things and I compare and contrast. So example would be Norman Foster. Maggie Center is incredibly lovable in Manchester, right? But the Apple Donut, which I have visited, is so elegant that it starts to lose its humanity, right? It's almost like Icarus.
And did you talk to people who work there?
Well, I visited it before it became occupied,
Was
right? So I saw different stages of its completion. So I saw the very complete version, and then I saw the parts where you look behind, and what's interesting, just like an Apple computer, all of the conduit lines up and is gorgeous, and all the concrete is polished, even the stuff you'll never see. It's like a perfect building, but almost too perfect.
I see.
Because if things get too perfect, humanity doesn't belong in it. So anyway, Apple is not inclined to let people do post-occupancy evaluations of it.
Well, maybe it's a good contrast to messy suburbia.
Well, the truth of that building will have to come out slowly because all Apple employees are under an NDA to not talk about it.
Okay.
And I was there without an NDA. So, but I'm not promoting. I love Apple. I love Apple computers. I love, like one of my favorite things is to say, this piece of software is so horrible. If only Apple engineers had designed it, it would be human friendly, right? So they've shown the world what you can do when you care about people in your software. The building may be a disconnect, but we don't know, right? It may be that everybody loves it. And it's more of an academic question, not a real question, because we can't actually go there.
But let's talk about some of the examples that you think are lovable, and what are the features that you
Maggie
think
Center, for example,
love them for?
and Maggie Center, it's a combination of a couple things. There's a quirky.
Do you have a picture of it?
Oh yeah.
Is it so? It's one of the 9 projects that you.
It's one of the 9 projects that I selected. Let's see. So there's Maggie Center, right there.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's very rustic. It's very garden-like. It has these really fascinating wooden trusses.
Almost handmade.
The idea of Norman Foster designing in wood, it's beautiful. It's very touching, but without this is the thing I would say about Foster is it's lovable without being sentimental. So it doesn't go to Disneyland, but the trusses, for example, have this beauty, and there's a bit of a history with the trusses too. There's a thing called the Belfast Trust, and so I talk about that a little bit. But what those trusses do is it softens it, it humanizes it, And it makes it, I mean, if you took all that away, it would be an ordinary minimalist, very elegant space, but it wouldn't be lovable. So the addition of just those elements, the little bit of playfulness to it, which was very clever, the way that they abstracted these trusses was brilliant, right? So I focus on that. And then, but then the easy ones are Frank Lloyd Wright, right? Or, because I think most all Frank Lloyd Wright buildings are lovable. In some way.
Especially houses.
Especially houses.
Yeah.
But I wrote about Taliesin East and West.
Okay.
Right. And then there's E. Fay Jones.
Oh yes, the church.
Yeah. And the churches, right? And the churches are very minimal actually, but at the same time the question is, are they minimal? Because they're taller height. Logically, there's too much height. Emotionally, it's perfect, right? So there's a great example of logic would say you only need a 10-foot ceiling instead of a 40-foot ceiling, right? Emotionally, the 40-foot ceiling does what it's intended to do. It gives you a sense of awe, a sense of spirituality. It pulls you out of your normal context of a 10-foot ceiling, and it makes you feel nature, right? Because it's instead of stone walls and all of this ornament in a cathedral, right? Because it's cathedral-like, you have nature. And you feel like you are in a Zen moment. So when I went to Japan, which was like 35 years ago, we went to many Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines, and there was that Zen feeling when you were there, unless it was full of 1,000 people. But
tourists.
But well, we were tourists too.
Okay.
But the trick was get there early. So we went to Rowanji.
Well, Sama opened 24 hours, I heard, right?
I could be,
So
but
it's never
we
too
went
early.
for example, we went to Rowanji. So on that little circuit of all the temples we were going to, we went to Rowanji first. That's the rock garden. The Zen garden with the
Beautiful.
white stone and then the 7 rocks, right? Just perfectly placed. And we got there when the door opened. We went in. We were the only people there. There were 3 of us.
Wow.
For 10 minutes.
So fortunate.
And then after 10 minutes, 1,000 school kids came.
Wow.
And you couldn't
And they
hear
just
yourself
ruined
think.
everything.
Well, it became a different experience, let's
Yeah.
say, and because there's a certain joy to all of those children, but it's very different than the experience of being there with just the quietness of the breeze, right? So
I wonder what you are an architect yourself. So what do you learn from these lovable buildings that you talk about, and what do you bring into your architecture from this?
Well, I think the thing with lovability is that there was a moment when, in more traditional buildings, there would always be something in the building that you could identify with, whether it was the entry to the building or whether it was a little tower spire, and it was kind of creative. When I walk around this area in the Art Deco period, they still did little towers. They still did very interesting corners. They did something, but there was still repetition. They still did not, they still embraced the concept of affordability and efficiency, but they did it in a way that sort of held together, and as you walk around, you can see a consistent pattern of, even in the most ordinary buildings, which would have been, moderate cost buildings. These were not mansions for people. These were 2-3 story apartment buildings in just around the convention center. And all of them have a lovability to them, even in their most simplest way, because there's something about it, and you can tie it emotionally. You can tie it to that Art Deco style, but they always had a little thing. So the Architectonica folks gave this the great talk about earlier in the session about Miami, and about a little bit about their work, and you look in Miami. There's a lot of glass towers now, sort of emotionally dead, right? Some of them have a little thing on them. They are famous for a big, long rectangle of mirrored glass, which, if that was all it was, no one would have paid any attention to it. But they pushed kind of a Corbusian hole in the middle of it and put color. They put yellow and red and blue, and it was excitement. That's all it needed. It just needed that one compositional element, and suddenly it goes from utterly unremarkable too exciting, and
Extraordinary.
it just took one little thing.
Yeah.
One little thing. So the rationalist says, well, there's no point for that one little thing, right? And because they don't value that little quirkiness that makes that building go from ordinary to extraordinary, right? And then, they did other things on it. The other side has a blue grid, and I mean, they worked it, but it was still a very efficient building. So you can have efficiency and lovability. And again, not all buildings need to be lovable. Some buildings need to have a different psychology to it. So the question would be, like with government buildings, should government buildings feel oppressive and strong and heavy and dominating, right? Which is likely what some people these days would want government buildings to be. Ironically, those same people right now want to return to neoclassicism,
Absolutely.
which is based on a bit of a democracy that they also seem to not be interested in promoting anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a disconnect. Thomas Jefferson brought neoclassicism to the United States because we were a federalist, right? So we did this brick style, brick and white trim, and it was a very lovely style with a few columns, very modest, but it was federalist. Well, Jefferson goes to Paris. Jefferson starts to think philosophically, and he says an architecture that represents democratic ideals and Republican ideals in the sense of Roman Republic and Greek republics. That is neoclassicism. And that we should go back to that philosophically, not because it was prettier or less pretty or nostalgic or not nostalgic, but it represented a philosophical standpoint to start from. Well, the current thing is there's a disconnect. It's nostalgia for an era that existed, but not the philosophical nostalgia, just the cultural nostalgia for that. And that is important. But the question is with modern architecture and with modernism, some of those ideals of modernism are very important, and they're not the nostalgic ones. Ideas of equality, ideals of how we treat each other, and the rule of law, and all of those things that go with Jeffersonian neoclassicism, those can be reflected, and those, I believe, are part of modernism. And we've lost that sense of Now, what happens is when you got a new thing, right? So modernism, at the turn of the century. So we talk about 1919, the founding of the Bauhaus, as beginning of the first century modernism. You could argue philosophically, did modernism start in the Renaissance, with the ascendancy of the individual versus the group, and that there's a whole nother philosophical issue about that tension between the group and the individual. And so when we look at this, going back 100 years.
What are the earliest examples?
Well, the Bauhaus would be the earliest examples.
So
But the thing is
100
before that, there was loose. There were people that did designs of buildings that tried to go away from the kind of the big stylistic movements that happened before, and said we're charting a new world. And there was an excitement. And I think for the first 50, 60 years, that excitement, I remember in my little hometown, which had Edwardian architecture in the Midwest, they had all these little two-story storefronts. They were beautiful. Now, everybody saw them as antiquated, and we needed modern things. So they put metal facades in front of those, and a little bit mid-century modern, but kind of a little too average, right? So they replaced all those storefronts, and they put up these, just kind of a color field, and it changed the character. It felt like a modern city. Well, now they've stripped most of that off, and they've gone back to the original one. Now, what's important there to me is there was a moment when we believed in that modernism, when we believed in stardust and rocket ships and science would solve all of these problems. Well, science is still there for us. But we've sort of, on the enthusiasm curve, we've realized that it's not a perfect thing. But it's still important. The balance of science and emotion, is really still very, very important. So in some ways, we're going, some of us are going too far over on the emotional side and just reacting to things without the rule of law and without science, and it needs to be a balance. Right.
I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about, the lessons. What can we learn from the buildings that you say are lovable, that a lot of people, even professionals or not professionals, enjoy? So what are those qualities?
So my thing is with this is to show examples of things that are lovable. I think that we don't want to make a rigid box. There's a whole range, wonderful spectrum of things that could be lovable, and we need to, as a profession, talk about those things. We don't talk about them. We don't have a language to talk about emotion. So, so the thing is, the hope is that people don't go, oh well, there's 9 or 18, depending on if you embrace everything that's in there, and you say, well, these are the next 9 to 18 styles that we need to do. No, you need to look at it and say, what is it about that worked? What is it about, and how can I do that with my new building? And we see this, I think Zaha's work, I think MAD architects, I mean there's a lot of architects in China that are doing, very emotionally engaging buildings. So it also depends on where you are in culture. And as cultures do this, are you on the upside, are you on the downside of culture? China is on a cultural uptick, right? The United States is on a little bit of a downtick, and but this is natural. Things go up and down. Economies go up and down. Culture goes up and down. Change is quirky, right? Change goes like this, like the stock market. It goes like that.
Yeah.
And so we're having some counter reactions to cultural issues of gender and democracy, and inevitably this will always happen. So we have to really look hard at what's important. So the idea here is to give people some examples to take the intimidation factor out of the word lovable, because I think a lot of people think that if you go to lovable, you're going directly to superficiality. You're going to a Hello Kitty store that's cute, and in my world, there's nothing wrong with cute. But cute is a word that is absolutely banished in architecture.
Absolutely.
Absolutely banished. But why? But why? So I get in trouble all the time for this, but it starts the conversation. It's provocative because people react, oh, architecture could never be cute. But what does cute mean? Cute means my 2 daughters, my 2 mothers, and my 2 sisters took 40 years to try to convince me that cute was a good thing. And I, as the black-clad architect, said, no, I am above cute. I know better. I have seen the light. And so I resisted until I went to Burning Man, and I had an existential moment where I had all these friends that were going out.
For the first time you went how many years ago?
2015.
Okay, and now since then
I've been 9 times.
You've
In fact, the cover of the book is a Burning Man project.
Okay.
So the Museum of No Spectators. So
okay, this was built.
This is built.
At some,
Well,
how many years ago?
I designed it. We fundraised for it, and we built it ourselves.
Okay.
So we had to do everything.
Okay. And is it still? Well, you had to
it's in New Mexico. It's in New Mexico now.
Oh, so
it was at Burning Man twice.
Moved it. Okay.
Yeah, we moved it to New Mexico, and there's an art park called Art City.
Oh, okay.
And
so it has an afterlife.
It has an afterlife, yeah.
Okay.
And it may make its way to Florida,
wow,
of all places, in a little town called Eatonville, which is not too far from where Disney World is.
Okay.
Right, from Fort Lauderdale, not Fort Lauderdale, where's Disneyland now? I'm kind of blanking.
Orlando?
Orlando,
yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Orlando, yeah.
So, to wrap it up, what advice would you give to a young architect?
Don't lose what was in your heart when you entered architecture, what you loved about architecture. You're as your career evolves, you're going to be working for other people. It's very important that you're helpful. They're paying you to be helpful, but they're also paying you to have a mind and to have a heart and to question things in the context of you're working for them. But you're also working for the public, you're working for the client, so you have to balance all of these different things. And to continue to do research and think about what you want to do and how you want your career to have a trajectory, because we're going to continue to build things. We're going to continue, hopefully, to build things, but to make the profession relevant, I believe we need that heart that you have when you start out as a young architect. We need to preserve that, and there will be a moment when you can truly engage in that. But that moment, architecture is a very slow process. It took me 8 years before I was able to really have significant design input. And now I'm I call myself the chief artistic officer of Form 4, but same as the design director, right? So now I direct people and try to encourage them to use their emotional resonance in their design work. And it's interesting because I'm so pro emotion. I still get people saying, but what's the reason? And I said the reason's in your heart. And let's explore that. Let's see where that goes. Don't worry about, because sometimes the reason comes at the end of the design process.
Absolutely.
So I have a project in India called Falling Lotus Blossoms.
Oh, wow.
And 4 million square feet buildings in the shape of lotus blossoms. Well, that word combination, lotus blossom, falling lotus blossoms, came after it was designed. We were playing around with form, we were playing around with different ideas, but we didn't say this is the idea and we're going to design to it. We played around with ideas, then we played around with form, and then in the end it was like, okay, we love this one. What does it mean? Now, the thing about it is intuitively what we decided it meant was always there. We just didn't use language while we were designing it to get it to focus, right? We've lost that part in architecture. Like, just trust your intuition, see where it goes, and then adapt. You don't have to do it linearly. You don't have to start with an idea and then execute the idea. You can start with a bunch of ideas and a bunch of different forms and see how they interact and interrelate to each other, and then come up with something that's a combination, a balance of both of those things.
That's a valuable advice. Well,
Yeah!
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
I
Vladimir.
want you to sign
Oh,
these two
yes.
posters. One of them is for you. So I want you to sign this one anywhere. And
Ta-da!